Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Amalia of Cleves, Henry VIII's possible fourth wife. Henry VIII's love life was nothing short of disastrous. The infamous and notorious king, who had 6 wives, even ordered the executions of 2 of them. But following the divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, things went very downhill. After ordering the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, Henry went from tragedy with his third wife, Jane Seymour, dying from postnatal complications, to lurching from disastrous marriages. Famously, his fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, was doomed from the start, as Henry did not think she looked like the painting that had been created for her from the trusted and famous artist Hans Holbein. Within months of marrying the king, their marriage was annulled. But there was another Cleves girl who was touted to marry the king, Henry VIII. However, the king chose Anne over her younger sister, Amalia. Now, Amalia of Cleves was born on the 17th of October 1517 and was the 4th and youngest child of John III, the Duke of Cleves, and his wife Maria of Jülichburg. She was born shortly after the birth of her brother William, who later became the Duke of Cleves himself. The family had a strong royal connection, as Amalia and her siblings were descended from the kings of England and France, and they were related rather closely to King Louis XII of France and also the Duke of Burgundy. As children, all of John III, the Duke of Cleves' children, spent their first few years being cared for by their mother Maria. Amalia's brother William left the household to be educated for his future role of the Duke of Cleves, and Amalia and her 2 sisters, Sybylle and Anne, were given a rather short-sighted education by the standards of the 16th century. And they were given an old-fashioned schooling, which wasn't up to the standards of the humanist education and Renaissance studies promoted within other high-standing families at the time. There was a promoting of domestic skills such as needlework and housekeeping to ensure that the Cleve girls would be well equipped to run a household. It was hoped that Amalia would marry one day a prince or possibly even a king, so these skills were key to prepare them as possible consorts of a European country. Amalia was 2 years younger than her sister Anne, but across the English Channel there was a king of England who was looking for his 4th wife. Henry VIII's 3rd wife had given him the heir and son he greatly wished for, in the form of Prince Edward, the future Edward VI, but Jane Seymour was known to have been suffering greatly from the birth of the child. Jane passed away on the 24th of October 1537 inside of Hampton Court Palace, but following her death it was said that Henry VIII recovered quickly from the loss of his 3rd wife. Following this, there was an insistence on immediately getting Henry another wife, and Thomas Cromwell and the Privy Council began to search for Henry's 4th wife. They looked to European continents for this, in the hope of gaining a significant allowance for Henry VIII and England, and also in gaining protection from France and also the Roman Empire. Both of these had made peace, and with this Henry VIII became paranoid about an attack launched against England and himself. Hans Holbein, who was regarded at the time in Tudor England as the king's painter, was sent to go and paint Anne of Cleves and Amalia of Cleves. Thomas Cromwell had proposed a marriage between Henry VIII and the Cleves girls to secure a strong alliance between them. Henry VIII told Holbein to paint the girls as accurately as possible and not to flatter them, so he could make a decision based on the looks as to who he would rather marry. At Burgau Castle, Holbein painted Anne of Cleves and also Amalia of Cleves, and both of the girls were dressed in their finery and best clothes for the images. It was said that Hans Holbein hath taken the effigies of my Lady Anne and the Lady Amalia, and hath expressed their images very lively. It's believed that the images painted by Holbein today are rather accurate, and Holbein did remain in favour at court, despite the disaster that came next. Henry VIII was presented with the 2 paintings of Anne of Cleves and Amalia, and he studied them to see who he would pick as his 4th wife. After considering both of the images, he chose Amalia's elder sister Anne to be his wife, and with this the marriage arrangements were made between the 2 sides. With regards to the portraits of Amalia, she does resemble her sister Anne, however she appears to be a brunette, as Anne was documented as being blonde. Also, she has the same hooded eyes as Anne, but rather sharper features. Anne of Cleves was then shipped over to England, and she met with the king a number of times but was not impressed with her looks. He was said that she looked old for her age, but the agreement to marry had already been drawn up, and Henry had to go through with it. But at the earliest opportunity the pair secured an annulment, and Anne was referred to in the sense as the king's sister, and was given huge grants of property and land all over the kingdom. She was even given Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, the former childhood home of Anne Boleyn. It's unknown how Amalia of Cleves felt with the slight rejection she had with regards to Henry VIII selecting her sister to marry him. However, in the following years, Amalia's family tried to secure her a marriage that would reap the profit and rewards for the Cleves family, and to secure a prominent marriage for her that would secure alliances and wealth. One possible match was with one of the sons of the Margraviate of Baden. His eldest son, Bernard, was a rather immoral and tearaway son, and this was not preferred by the Cleves family, and the other son, Karl, was almost 12 years younger than Amalia. Neither of these was seen as suitable, but Amalia's brother had now become the Duke of Cleves. He respected the wishes of his two sisters, Amalia and Sybylle, who both saw themselves as strong women, and he refused to marry Amalia to someone like Bernard, and because of this, Amalia lived her life at her brother's court, and she helped her brother to raise his children. Amalia never married, and enjoyed spending time raising her nieces. These all went on to have good marriages, but all 4 of the nieces were raised with a Lutheran education, and it's believed Amalia had a role in this. She herself was a strong devotee to Lutheranism, and at one point this enraged her brother so much that he drew his sword at his sister. It's believed that she was a fan of music and poetry, and it's believed she was a strong patron of music in Germany at the time. She also wrote a songbook which today is found in the German National Library. However, compared to her sister Anne of Cleves, her life was rather low-key. Anne would live out the rest of her life in England, possibly fearing her brother as the Duke of Cleves. However, Amalia stayed close by William, despite their differences. Amalia did manage to outlive her 2 sisters, and she died on the 1st of March 1586 at the seat of her family in Dusseldorf at the age of 68. So Amalia of Cleves was the youngest sister of Anne, who could very easily have become the 4th wife of King Henry VIII. If Henry had preferred the painting of her over her elder sister, then it's believed that marriage negotiations would have started immediately for Amalia as they did for Anne, which is unclear though, in what reaction Henry would have given to Amalia if she was the chosen one, and what he would have made of her when she came over to England. Amalia was noted to have sharper features than her sister, but what Henry said about her sister was rather scathing and insulting. Henry VIII at the time was already much older than Anne of Cleves, and marrying Amalia would have led to an even bigger age gap, but it's interesting to consider whether Henry would have preferred the younger Amalia. After his annulment from Anne, he pursued the much younger Catherine Howard, who it's believed at the time of her execution was possibly even as young as 17 years old. What is certain, though, is that Amalia's life as a princess, in a sense, was much lower key than that of her sisters, and it's not known how much contact the 2 sisters had in their later years. Amalia could have been the 4th wife of the infamous King Henry VIII, if Holbein had painted her more in a more flattering light, but it's likely that the king, who had a wandering eye, would have possibly grown tired of her too. Amalia of Cleves today is the princess who could have been the 4th wife of King Henry, if only some brushstrokes had been different. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.